Okay, so no, it wasn't planned actually. We hadn't really intended to take so long, but a number of things happened. One of them was that the touring for Surgical Steel lasted a lot longer than some of us would have expected. So we ended up spending on and off about 5 years touring around various parts of the world and playing a lot of festivals. And then, of course, we had the pandemic. So this album, when it's released, will be 2 or 3 years old, really, as far as we're concerned. But, that's the way of things. And I think maybe the album's stronger for us having waited, because some of this material has really matured over that time. Quite a lot of these songs were worked on many years ago, and they've been through a few changes, and I just think it's a more diverse record because we did end up waiting so long. The title Torn Arteries comes from a recording that Ken Owen, our original drummer, made when we were kids at school. And we didn't know Jeff at that time, but in later years I told Jeff about this tape and how great it was. And I think he just remembered the title and he liked it. He felt it was appropriate for this record. In terms of the relationship to the cover artwork, I genuinely don't know, because that was cooked up between Jeff and his artist friend in Poland, whose name I still can't pronounce, shamefully. But it was presented as a finished piece. So Dan and I were both quite surprised when he showed it to us, but we were in favor, because I think we all agreed we needed a sleeve that was going to stand out, that wouldn't be a typical generic metal album cover. The decision to release Kelly's as the first so-called single was probably coming from the record label first and foremost. I know that Dan and Jeff were in favor too, but I think generally speaking, record companies like to play it safe with things like this. And Kelly's is definitely closer in style to some of our early work compared to the rest of the album. So I'd say it's in many ways one of, if not the most conservative tracks on the album. The rest of it tends to be a lot more varied dynamically. I like the tune, but it's not necessarily my favorite one on the album, It's just one of those things, I guess. Yeah, when we're working on new material, often it will begin with a feel or a rhythm or a drum groove. So I had something in mind, that kind of tom and snare drum pattern that drives most of the song, and I had a riff to go with it. So we were kind of jamming on this for a while, and then other ideas started to come up, and you just kind of go with the flow as it's happening. So that was one of those tunes that after a while started to just write itself, and it was fun to do because obviously it's quite different from anything we'd released on previous albums. I gather it's quite polarizing. Maybe not everybody digs that particular style, but it works for us. With the song Flesh Ripping Sonic Torment, I would say that we always knew it was going to be a longer track because the initial piece of music I brought in was much more complicated than usual, and it took far longer for any of the parts to repeat. So we knew we were dealing with something that was on a grander scale than one of our more kind of traditional style of tunes. But we didn't quite know how long it was going to go. It took on a life of its own and developed over a period of time, and we just kept adding more parts, and eventually we ended up with something that was well over 9 minutes. But the whole thing was fun to do. It was a challenge. You know, we wanted to have things on this album that Carcass hadn't done before. So I guess this would be one of the best examples. And yeah, the acoustic intro is part of that, because there hasn't really been much acoustic stuff on any Carcass record in the past, just the tiniest bit. I think it's fair to say that the whole album was something of a challenge from the outset, purely because we had higher hopes for it, I guess. It was never going to be okay to just repeat the same formula as Surgical Steel. We knew this had to be a different record. We couldn't possibly justify making an album if we had nothing new to say. So, but the scope was always going to be wider, and we knew we'd have to work harder, not just on the material and the way we arranged the songs, but also the production aspects, because there's a bit more space in this music. There's definitely a lot more happening dynamically. So sometimes you have to take the extra time to kind of embellish those parts and get them to be the best they can be in the studio. Last time with Surgical, there was some of that stuff happening, of course, but a lot of the time it wasn't necessary, because so much of that material is just fast. There really isn't a lot of oxygen in that music, whereas this time around there is. You've kind of got a blend of some very intense stuff with some other kind of feels that are a lot more, I won't say relaxed, but they kind of have more of a swagger, and they take their time to hit you rather than just getting up in your face immediately. I would say there are some elements of that era of music in what we do with Carcass, and particularly this new album. The thing is, it might not be immediately obvious to people because it's gone through the Carcass filter. And not only are we playing in a much lower tuning, you know, B standard, using thicker strings, lots of distortion, it's also gone through the Carcass mincer. So a piece of music I bring into the rehearsal room can get changed drastically with the inputs of the guys. You know, both Dan and Jeff have very strong ideas on arrangement. So once it's been through all of that, I guess not many people will hear a kind of classic hard rock influence in the band, but it's definitely there, along with a kind of, say, early 80s, you know, traditional heavy metal vibe too. But all of those things get twisted in a Carcass way. As people probably already know, Jeff is the lyricist in Carcass, and he's also the guy in charge of visuals and the management side too. But I think he likes to reference things from our past. You know, he refers to it as the Carcass mythology almost. But that's part of a bigger thing with him, because he loves to reference cultural touchstones, things that will resonate with people. So it wouldn't be just stuff about our past, you know, it'd be things from, you know, the common past, music and politics and history and stuff. I think stuff like that just sparks him off, really. And you're right, yeah, there are a few very obvious nods to things from our history in this new set of lyrics. Oh, we would love to play in Uruguay. I've never visited that country, and I've always wanted to. I think Jeff perhaps has been there, maybe when he was touring with Brujeria, but I can't be certain. As for South America in general, well, obviously it's a massive place, and of the countries that we have visited with this band, it's quite clear that each one has its own set of characteristics. It's every bit as diverse as Western Europe, for example. I think if you come from this part of the world, like the UK, South America is always going to be mysterious and glamorous. There are so many things that are noticeably different from home for us. The people are just very warm. You know, they make you feel so welcome. They look a lot healthier than we do, generally speaking. Everything, the food, the drinks, the climate. I don't know, it's magical. I've been there a few times, but it's not enough, you know. As a tourist, you always want to see more and experience more. So if we ever have the opportunity to go there and have a couple of days off somewhere, that would be just a golden opportunity.